Welcome back to Rin Behind the Practice and to the next Patterns episode. If you're new here, these episodes are a little different. They're not interviews, they're reflections. They're me stepping back and looking at the conversations I've been having with practitioners and pulling out the patterns that are emerging underneath the surface. If we haven't met yet, I'm Sophie Campisi. I'm a holistic business strategist, and I work with practitioners, coaches, and healers who are incredibly skilled at what they do, but are struggling to get the business side of things to actually work. My work is really focused on bridging that gap between being brilliant in your craft and being able to build a business around it that is clear, sustainable, and actually reaches the people you are meant to help. And one of the things I started noticing over the past few years is that some of the most honest, important conversations about building a practice are still happening quietly, one-on-one, behind the scenes, in isolation. And there's still so much guilt and confusion and internal pressure when the business side of things isn't working the way people hoped that it would, even when the work that they're doing with their clients is powerful. So the goal of this podcast is to bring those conversations out in the open, to normalize them, to make them more visible, and to hopefully soften some of that pressure that so many practitioners are carrying. Because one of the most important things I want people to understand, and something that comes up in almost every single conversation that I have, is the state of your business is not a reflection of how good you are at your work. Those are two completely different skill sets. And at the same time, just because we weren't taught how to build a business doesn't mean that we don't have the responsibility to learn how, because we do. And at the same time, just because we weren't taught how to build a business doesn't mean we don't have the responsibility to learn how to build a business. Because if the business doesn't work, the work doesn't reach people. Your mission doesn't reach people. So we do have a duty and responsibility to do what we need to do to make sure that we are able to build a business that helps us bridge the gap from our brilliance and the work that we do with the people that needs it most. And that's really what I've been paying attention to across these recent conversations. Again, different practitioners, different modalities, different stages of business, but underneath all of that, there are patterns. Patterns where people are getting stuck, patterns in what's actually working, patterns in what's not working. So today I want to walk through a few of the patterns that have been coming up, specifically from my conversations with Eir Atla, Shelly Haas, Dr. Daunter, Manta Landerman, and Arlana Tanner. These are going to be reflections through expert lens about what's actually happening in the field. And I'm going to start bringing forward insights so that we can all collectively continue to shift our distinctions and come closer to building the businesses that we need that are really able to support the mission that we're bringing into the world. One of the first patterns that really stood out to me is this idea that more effort equals more results, more content, more hours, more pushing, more doing. And what I'm seeing over and over again is that people are taking a lot of action, but it's not necessarily the right action. This came up really clearly in my conversation with Eir. She literally said, I know what I need to do. I just feel stuck when it comes to actually putting it out there. And that's such an important distinction because the problem isn't laziness. The problem isn't discipline. The problem isn't willpower. The problem is that we haven't raised the bar for what actually counts as meaningful action. And again, no one's doing this on purpose. It's that we don't have the clear distinctions. We haven't been taught clearly how to build, the process for building, the types of businesses that we need to build to bring our work into the world. We have to start changing the types of actions that we're taking. If we keep doing the same things that aren't working, that aren't bringing results, that aren't showing us steady, consistent client flow, it's not consistency that's the problem. It's not the amount of work that we're doing that's the problem. It's the types of actions that we're taking and the process that we're using for building that is the fundamental problem. Because in reality, more of the wrong action just leads to more frustration, more confusion, more burnout, more spinning. What I'm seeing is that a lot of practitioners are exhausting themselves without actually moving forward and without actually getting that solid momentum. So the shift is not how do I do more or I need to just do more. It's how do I do the right things so that when I'm showing up consistently, I'm confident that I'm taking the actions that I need to build the business that I know is going to support my work, support me, support the life that I want to be living. One aligned strategic action is worth more than 100 scattered ones. I relate to this one so deeply to my core. My biggest frustration when I was building my holistic practice was that I constantly felt like I was wearing a blindfold. I will do the work. I will show up every single day and do what I need to do. But I never knew if the action I was taking was the actual action that I needed to be taking. Is this the right decision? Is this the right place to invest my time, my money, my resources, my energy? After the initial glow of starting my practice faded after a few years, it really was frustrating because I believed in what I did so much. I knew it wasn't the quality of the work that I had. I was very clear that something on the business side wasn't clicking. And I was craving a big picture strategy, a big picture process and plan that I could follow, knowing that the steps I was following were actually the ones that were going to bring me to where I wanted and needed to get to. So if this resonates, I feel you. I was you for so many years. This is a big problem. This is part of what contributes to the burnout. Most of the people that I work with aren't brand new. They've been doing it for 5 years, 7 years, 8 years. And they're often coming to a reality point of, I'm going to need to get another job. I need to pick up another job. This isn't sustainable long term. I'm doing action day in and day out. I'm so passionate about what I do, but I'm not actually seeing that consistent, steady flow that allows me to be immersed in my mission and be immersed with the work that I'm doing and being immersed with my clients. There's always going to be action to take with the business, yes. But if and when we don't know the actual action that is aligned and we're just taking action, that is part of what contributes to that burnout, that hamster wheel feeling. And again, one aligned strategic action is worth more than 100 scattered ones. Okay, moving on. The second pattern builds directly on top of that. And this came up really clearly in my conversation with Shelly. There's this gap between the depth of the work and the clarity of the business, meaning you can be incredibly clear in what you do. You can be deeply skilled. You can have years of experience. You can know your work inside and out, but still have no clear way to translate that into something that people can understand, into a business model that is solid and sustainable. And this is especially true for visionaries, for people who see into the future, for people who see deeply, who feel deeply, who work in nuanced, layered, dynamic ways. Because your work doesn't fit into a simple box, but your business does need to be simple enough for people to recognize themselves in it. What I see is happening is that instead of simplifying, we overcomplicate, we overexplain, we try to say everything, we try to include everything. And in doing that, we actually make it harder for people to connect to us. So the real work here is learning how to translate your gifts into something that is clear, structured, and supportive, not just for your clients, but for your nervous system, your life, your sustainability with this work long term. Because your business should support your work, not make it harder to do. Another layer to this that I talked with Shelly is we are visionaries. We often see into the future. So the way that we build businesses isn't necessarily linear. We often see far out into an end result and have to learn and understand how to work that backwards to bridge the gap from where we go with our expertise to where our people actually are. Shelly brought this up in such a clear, beautiful way. She was saying, she's built levels 10, 9, and 8 of her business, but she was trying to figure out how to make it all the way back down to level 1. Spot on description of how so many of us are building. I want to pull out 2 clear things here. Because we are visionaries and we often do things backwards or not linearly or not exactly how they might be done in the rest of the business world, doesn't mean we have to change, but there are vital business principles that we cannot skip over. I'm going to talk about this more in pattern number 4 today, But it's so important for us to realize this, is that yes, we have a dynamic way of seeing and feeling and building, but it doesn't mean that we can pass over the vital things that we need that will allow us to build the solid, clear, sustainable business models that will take our work from floors 10, 9, 8, all the way to floor 1, where people are walking in the door. So thank you, Shelly, so much for bringing this metaphor up. If this resonated with you, if you resonated with Shelly talking about how she's built the high floors of her business, but she's trying to figure it out, how to make it down to floor 1 to connect with her people, you're in the right place. I'm telling you, it is possible, but you do need to understand the things that you can't skip over that will allow you to gracefully go from those higher floors all the way down to floor 1. Reach out to me. I want to hear from you. I want to support you in your business building process because your business should and can support your work, not make it harder to do. So it's important for you to understand what you need to learn to find harmony between those two things. The way that you naturally build as a visionary and the things that you can't skip over, there is harmony between those two things. Now moving into the third pattern. This one's deeper, and it came up in a really powerful way in my conversation with Dr. Terry Daunter. And it's this point that the work that we do is not just work. The businesses that we're building are not just normal businesses. What we are doing is supporting people through real pain, real confusion, real disorientation, real transformation. Dr. Terry spoke about this in a way that really stayed with me, about how awakening can feel. It can feel chaotic. It can feel disorienting. It can make people feel like aliens. If you are a practitioner, if you are a holistic coach, if you are a healer, you have answered the call to service, you know what I'm talking about. You have already gone through this in some capacity. You are a way shower that is here to guide others through this process. Because we're not just seeing this in small individual examples anymore. We're seeing this collectively. There is a collective dark night of the soul happening. And simultaneously, there is a collective awakening that is happening and that will continue to follow the dark night. One way to think about it is that maybe this was a path that was less traveled before. So let's think about it like an untraveled road before. It was forest. People made it to this road of dark night of the soul, turned into transformation, turned into big awakening. They're in the forest. They're climbing over trees. They're trying to navigate their way. And as the decades and years have gone, more people have started to go on this journey of awakening. So let's say then it kind of turned into a little bit of a dirt road. There were more people going, but it was still rocky. It's still not very paved. It's a smaller path. Well, now let's think of the massive demand. There are way more people that are getting pushed into this road of awakening. That dirt road is not going to suffice anymore. That chaos is not going to suffice anymore. So if we think of the work that we're all doing as bridging, it's like we need to be contributing to paving the path, paving better highway systems, paving better roadways, so that the influx and flood of people that are going up the path in the journey of awakening can go through it with a lot more grace and ease than before. So this means, again, if you're listening to this, you are part of that. This isn't just about building a business so that you can make money. It's about being ready. Because if your business isn't stable, if it isn't clear, if it isn't working smoothly, then when people need you, they won't be able to find you. And that's the part that really matters. So this becomes less about why isn't my business working and more about how do I make sure that I'm ready to support the people who need me. So think about your business as the structure that is intricately intertwined between you and the place that you are and the people that need you. We can't let that be an overgrown forest, and it's not even going to suffice anymore for it to be a dirt road. It needs to be a solid, clear, strong structure so that the people who need to find you can walk across that road and get to you. The fourth pattern that keeps coming up, and this came through really clearly in my conversation with Manta, is that business building for mission-driven, heart-led businesses like ours is much more like gardening than it is like hunting. And I know I touched on this in that conversation with Manta, but I want to say it more clearly here because I think this is one of the most helpful metaphors I have for how this whole thing actually works. A lot of practitioners are trying to build their businesses like they're hunting, like they need to go find the client, get the sale, go force the result, go make something happen. And I understand why. Because when things feel uncertain or money feels tight or you're craving traction, there's a tendency to grip harder, to push harder, to think that if you just do more, something will eventually click. But what I really want to reinforce here is that for people like us, business building and practice building works much more like gardening, not hunting. And the difference matters because with gardening, there are certain things that have to be present before growth can happen. You need the right soil, you need water, you need light, you need seeds, and then you need ongoing tending. That is how I think about businesses, and that is how I teach people how to build businesses. There are a few vital foundations that have to be in place before long-term growth can happen. You need clarity on who your people are. You need clarity on what problem you solve. You need a clear offer or path that connects your work to that problem. You need ways for people to experience and assess you so that trust can build. And then you need consistent cultivation, the real tending. It's not random action. Those are the business Those, simply speaking, are the business version of soil, water, light, seeds, and care. And if one of those things is missing or weak or blurry, you can spend all day taking action and still not seeing movement. That's the thing. Sometimes the reason growth isn't happening is not because you're lazy. It isn't because you aren't trying hard enough. It isn't because your work isn't good. It's because something vital underneath the surface hasn't been fully put in place yet. And if you miss that distinction, you'll keep trying to solve the wrong problem. You'll keep trying to market harder when the real issue is that your offer isn't clear enough, or you keep trying to be more visible when the real issue is that the right people still can't recognize themselves in your work. Or you'll keep trying to stay consistent and be more consistent when what you're being consistent in isn't actually rooted in the right foundations. And this is why this metaphor matters so much, because gardens don't bloom because you stood over them and forced or panicked or tried to do more things quicker. They bloom because the right conditions were created and then they were tended to consistently. That's it. Not perfectly, not overnight, not because you forced them, but because the foundations were there and then you kept showing up, taking the right action. And this also helps explain something else that comes up all the time, why some practitioners can be working so hard and still not seeing growth. It's because not all action is equal. Again, back to the first pattern. If you're watering concrete, nothing is going to grow. If you put seeds down, but there's no soil, nothing is going to grow. If you put soil and you have water, but the seeds aren't there, nothing is going to grow. It does not matter how disciplined you are. It does not matter how many hours you spend. It does not matter how badly you want it. If the seeds aren't there, the soil isn't right, if the placement is off, the answer is not try harder, be more consistent. The answer is slow down enough to assess what is actually missing. That's the work. That's the strategic work. And I think this is one of the biggest missing distinctions in our space because people keep trying to jump to growth tactics without understanding whether the foundational conditions for growth are actually there. So when I say business building is more like gardening than hunting, what I mean is this: your job is not to force the outcome. Your job is to create the conditions for growth and then tend to them consistently enough, long enough for that growth to happen. That is a very different nervous system experience. It's also a much truer one for us because our job then becomes cultivation, connection, authenticity. It's a different type of consistency. And it's one that, in my opinion, much better reflects how people like us are actually meant to build businesses. Now I'm going to shift to the fifth pattern that I want to talk about today. And it came through so strongly in my conversation with Arlana. And I'm really glad it did, because I think she put words to something a lot of people feel, but maybe haven't fully named. And that is this: one of the biggest things holistic practitioners are struggling with is credibility. That was one of the things she kept coming back to: credibility, credibility, credibility. And she's right. Because we work in unregulated spaces. We don't have overseeing governing bodies. A lot of the work we do is not easily understood by the general public. A lot of people don't know what the words mean, what the titles mean. They don't know how to evaluate quality. They don't know what makes one practitioner different from another. And they often don't know what results are even possible. So if we want trust, if we want people to take our work seriously, if we want the right people to actually find us and choose us, we have to build that trust and credibility more intentionally. And I think this is where a lot of practitioners get it backwards. They think credibility comes from looking polished, or having a beautiful website, or saying the right thing, or listing all their certifications, or being vague in a really elevated way. But that's not actually what builds trust. What builds trust is clarity. What builds trust is specificity. What builds trust is becoming deeply, deeply masterful in one particular area. And that's what I want to emphasize here. The fastest path to real credibility is not trying to be everything to everyone. It's becoming known for something very specific and very real. It's for helping a specific type of person with a specific type of pain move forward to a very specific kind of dream outcome. That's how trust gets built. Because when you stay too general, you dilute your credibility. When you work with too many different types of people, talk about too many different types of problems, and keep your work too broad, you slow down your own mastery. And this is very important, because mastery is not just about skill in your modality. It's also about pattern recognition. It's about seeing the same types of people, the same types of struggles, the same types of dynamics over and over again until you become incredibly sharp and masterful, until you become incredibly sharp, incredibly precise, incredibly effective. And when that happens, a few things shift. You get better results, you get better language, you get more confidence, and your people can feel that. That is credibility. It's not fake confidence. It's not inflated confidence. It's confidence rooted in the real skill, real clarity, and real results. And I think this is one of the biggest ways we need to raise the bar in our industry. We need to stop hiding in generality. We need to stop thinking that being broad is safer because we don't want anyone to be left out. It's not safer. It just makes it harder for people to trust us. Because when someone is hurting, when someone is confused, when someone is trying to decide whether to invest time, energy, money, vulnerability into working with you, they are looking for signs of safety. They are looking for signs that you understand them. They are looking for signs that you've done this before, that you know their terrain, that you can help guide them. And the clearer you are, the more trust they can build, the more masterful you become, the more credibility naturally flows. So when Arlana keep bringing up credibility, what I kept thinking was yes. And the way we build it is by doing a much better job on the business side, not by becoming more fake, not by becoming more salesy, not by performing, not by being trendier online, but by becoming clearer, sharper, more grounded, more specific, more masterful. That is how we strengthen the bridge between our work and the people who need it. That is how we raise the standard. And honestly, I think that is one of the most important things in front of us right now. So as we wrap up today, one of the things that became really clear to me as I was sitting with these conversations and with these patterns is the practitioners I'm speaking with are not struggling because their work lacks value. They're struggling because the bridge between their gifts and the people who need them is still shaky. And that bridge is the business. It's the clarity, it's the structure, it's the understanding how to take something that's powerful and make it accessible. Because when this works, something really meaningful happens. People get the support they need, they find language for what they're going through, they feel less alone, they start to move through things that once felt stuck. And when it doesn't, the cost is much bigger than a business not succeeding. It's people not finding the help they need. So if you're somewhere in this process, if you're gifted at what you do, if you're brilliant at what you do, but the business side hasn't fully clicked yet, you are not alone and you're not wrong. You're just being asked to learn a completely different skill set, one that most of us were never taught. And the more we can bring these conversations into the open, the more we can build this differently, more clearly, more honestly, and in a way that actually supports the work that we care about and feels really, really good in our bodies and to our nervous systems. Because this work matters. What you are doing matters. And the way we build around it matters too. The old way of doing things is not cutting it for us. And my goal and my mission is to help us solve that problem. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode of Ren Behind the Practice.